Love at first sight can happen, but it's still choosing love when you see each other 10,000 times that makes all the difference. Today I'm joined by my wife Rebecca and a couple who found love at university and 17 years later still say, I do. Welcome, Doyin and Sophie. It's so great to have you here with us.
Thanks for having us.
So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself so people at home can get to know you?
Okay, so I'm Sophie and this is my husband Doyin.
Hi.
We've been together for 17 years now. We're coming up to celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary this August. So I'm going to give our ages away now, but we've been together since we were 18. So we've managed to share almost half of our lives together, actually, which is a really significant milestone for us.
Wow.
And we are happily married. We have two beautiful children, two girls, aged 2.5 and 5. So we're very busy. And yeah.
What do you do professionally?
So I'm an accountant. I work in the NHS. Sophie's an advisor in political affairs and government affairs working in the automotive industry.
Fascinating careers.
How did you meet?
So we met at the Freshers' Fair when we started university, and actually it was almost the first day of university. And we spotted each other. I spotted Doyin across a crowded room. It sounds very cheesy, I know, but it's true. He's very tall and he stood out, and as soon as I saw him and I saw his smile, I knew at that moment that there was something really special about him. And I can say it was love at first sight for me.
Doyin, would you agree?
It was a crowded room.
It's a bit rough. Yeah.
But very quickly
it was love at first sight, definitely.
You were very quickly pursuing Sophie yourself, weren't you?
Or being pursued, possibly. But I think let Sophie pick up the story. Let's see how it unfolds.
Well, our paths crossed later that day, walking down a street, nowhere near where we'd been actually earlier in the day. And I spotted him and I said, that's him. And
I was definitely being stalked.
No, he wasn't. And there was a moment where we passed each other, we smiled. Then I looked over my shoulder and he did. I carried on walking. I looked over my shoulder a second time and he did. And I knew at that point, okay, you know, we're going to meet at some point. And then about a week later, we were in the same gym induction at university, and the rest is history, basically.
Wow.
So,
We didn't listen to anything that the gym instructor said. We spent an hour looking at each other as we went round, and then, yeah, from there, the rest really is history.
Amazing. So now you said you're coming up for your 10th year wedding anniversary. That's a real significant milestone. And thinking about those days back when you're in a gym induction, all the dreams and all of the aspirations you had, when you sit here now, thinking back over those 17 years, how have you grown in that time? And were you expected to be in your careers and your family choices and so on?
I think it's been looking back, we're really privileged, and I think many of the things we used to sit up late at night talking about, we've seen come to pass, and not just in terms of what we've achieved, but the way we've done it, the way we've supported each other. We've got two wonderful children. We're progressing really well with our careers, which is really challenging when you balance family life, but also we haven't lost our individual sense of identity either. We've managed to retain some of the things that we always did those years ago. Hasn't always been easy, but the way we've had to give and take and support each other and support actually some of the people around us as we've travelled on that journey. I think looking back, actually, we would now say we're at a stage where many of the things we've talked about, we've seen them come to pass. It's surreal. We're really blessed, actually, to be able to look at things in that way. There are obviously loads more things we'd like to do and achieve together, but actually, we've done a lot of what we set out to do back then, and that's really a wonderful testimony, because I think from my point of view, I always wanted to meet somebody who I could grow up and grow old with. And looking back from this point, actually a lot of those things we've actually done, and so everyone has different dreams, but I actually really feel like I'm living that dream, that expectation that I had, and I hope you feel the same way. I'm sure you do, but yeah, it's a real privilege and testimony.
How have you grown together or changed kind of over the years? Because 17 years is quite a long time and you were young, so, you know, looking back.
Yeah, Doyin and I have got very different personalities. However, at the core, we're very similar. So we have the same interests, the same goals, the same kind of aspirations and the same drive. And there are elements of our personality that are very similar. But for example, Doyin is a very practical person. He's very pragmatic. He's very logical. He doesn't get fazed by very much. You know, I'm much more the kind of the creative side, slightly more emotional or sensitive in a you know, kind of outgoing type of way. So over the years, one of the things that we've never done is we've never tried to change one another. But what we have seen, and I definitely know, is that we've influenced one another. So I know that I'm much thicker skinned and a bit tougher and more resilient because of the support that Doyin's given me and has kind of almost kind of mentored, kind of coached me in certain situations. And also I've seen a softness emerging to Doyin over the years that I can tell, you know, has come from maybe my more creative, my maybe slightly more sensitive side. So I think it's more about the fact that over the years we've work together mutually to kind of reinforce and build one another up and strengthen one another, maybe in the areas of that needed a bit more input.
There are some key things that you were saying there about growing together and reaching for the goals. And I think that one of the key things to facilitate that is having a very strong marriage where you've carefully invested in and developed yourselves and grown towards one another. Now, people don't really talk much about preparing for marriage. Could you give us some insights on what you've done to do that over the years?
So I think preparation for marriage is a really critical aspect of planning a lifelong union together. And I think Sophie and I spent a lot of time having some, at times, really difficult conversations way before we even contemplated getting engaged. And I think we went through a process of being absolutely honest with each other about our expectations, our hopes, our desires, our strengths, our weaknesses, the things that we felt were likely to change about ourselves, the things we felt are unlikely to change about ourselves. But in doing that, I think we gave each other a platform to really understand the substance of who each other is and was likely to be. And so I think through doing that, we've not left anything hidden. There's nothing left to discover about each other in terms of problems that might surface down the road, which gives a level of confidence and assurance about approaching the future. I think the commitment that we made when we got engaged to be married is that we weren't staying necessarily for the good times, because it's easy to stay together when things are good, but actually when things get difficult, I'm here. And one can only do that if you know completely and trust completely in your partner, your spouse. And that we went through a journey of some really difficult conversations. Actually, as a result of our studies at that time, we spent quite a long time apart. And that gave us the opportunity to be honest with each other and be honest with ourselves about the type of lives we would lead. We didn't put each other under pressure to conform. And we independently made decisions about accepting each other. And I think that was a really key aspect of giving us a platform for our future.
Yeah. So what kind of, could you give us an example of so say there are people out there listening and they're dating and they're thinking about marriage or a future and building a good foundation. What are kind of some of the things that they might talk about that could prepare them for that?
So, I mean, there are some really serious things, but there are some really humorous things as well, or some might say. I'll give a humorous example. Sophie grew up camping and
not all the time. We went on camping holidays.
But in Sophie's house, camping is a holiday.
That's awesome.
In mine, it's not.
Yeah, sure.
And Sophie's always been really passionate about traveling and seeing new places. And one of the things we had to establish is how we felt about camping. I had to be really clear. I'm never camping. If that's that, it's a trivial example, I know, but it's the kind of thing that actually deep down, that's a really important part of Sophie's upbringing, some of the things she wanted to do. And
however, he has been camping, so.
So you did compromise.
A little bit. Glamping, let's call it glamping. Got him into glamping.
There was a shower,
That's very good.
But I guess that's a light-hearted example of some of the things that are really important. We talked about our expectations around having children and the roles that our families would play. We come from very different traditions of of family and marriage. And so, even things like disciplining children and our approach to problem solving and headship in the home and all of those kind of things, actually we had to talk about those before you get into your first disagreement at a later stage, because that really becomes a problem. Having a platform.
Are there some practical ways, like did you do any courses or anything that really helped you on that journey?
Yeah, so we undertook the pre-marriage course. Did you guys do similar as well?
Yeah.
And we found that to be really, really useful, actually. And it really gave us quality time where there were no distractions. We didn't have to think about anything else other than the two of us. And we talked about really poignant topics, poignant issues. It was just a very, very useful tool, and it also gave us skills to go into marriage. We also then did the marriage course maybe about 2 or so years after we got married, and we're signing up actually for a marriage course this year again. And I think sometimes people can almost feel a bit anxious about what other people think, if they say they're going on a marriage course, but it's about putting that aside and saying, there's no problem. We're not saying there's a problem in our relationship. Actually, it's kind of the opposite. We're saying that we want to invest in our marriage, and we know that marriage isn't easy. And 17 years down the line, we've been through some ups and some downs. We've been through some challenging times. And there's something just so wonderful about having the skills that we've learnt on those courses to remind ourselves that we can get through this together. We're a unit. We're as one. And also other examples of thinking about our personalities and our strengths. So sometimes I just know that Doyin just needs some space. And early on in the marriage, maybe I would have found that really difficult because I just want to speak and I want to talk about things and I want to, if there's something, not quite right, I want to solve it. But actually, as we've matured and got older and I've thought about those skills, I just realised it's okay. He just needs some space. There might not even be anything wrong. He might just be tired after a long day at work. So I think going on courses gives you skills.
I think I would add to that by saying actually just the discipline of making time to go on the course actually is a really helpful discipline. We all these days lead really busy lives. Creating that dedicated time, whether it's for a course or simply just to be with each other on regular interval, is really, really key for keeping, I guess, the love and the relationship alive, not just the business of living together in the same house.
So, and also just this idea of love. I mean, we've been talking about love at first sight and now continuing into love in 17 years later and thinking about ways we can equip ourselves with skills. One of the great tools out there is this whole issue of love languages, and Gary Chapman's written a book on this. There's 5 love languages. Do you know each other's?
Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was really a key thing that we learnt in the marriage course. So I know that Doyin's love language is acts of service or acts of devotion. So small things that might seem small, but for example, in our household, we divide the household tasks together. So actually, Doyin won't mind me saying that he's the kind of the laundry man. He takes charge of the laundry, the ironing, the washing. I help, but I'm much more, I enjoy cooking the food. That's something I find really therapeutic. So there are ways in which we divide our household tasks. And I know that if Doyin comes into the room and finds that I'm ironing his shirts, or totally impromptu, I've polished his shoes, it literally fills his heart with joy. And I'm onto a winner. So I know that small things like that, it's an act and it's a sign to him. And I do it deliberately sometimes to really just remind him and show him how much I love him, because I know it means so much to him. So it's a conscious thing that I do. Yeah.
And from my point of view, Sophie is very responsive to words of affirmation and to touch and signs of affection. And I guess for me, actually, that's something I have to be quite intentional and conscious about because I think naturally I am more withdrawn. I'm not the most expressive. And so I need to make an effort to remember that actually those small gestures, those small touches, those words spoken at an opportune moment actually carry massive weight and speak massively to Sophie. And I have to really work at that because it doesn't always come instinctively to me, and it's okay. I guess that's when we talk about love and love languages, it's about making a conscious effort. Actually, it's not always about how you feel, because I often don't feel like acting a certain way, but my wife relies on that and depends on that. And for me to keep our union alive and healthy, sometimes I need to be reminded, but I also need to make a conscious effort to keep doing that. So.
And it provides such an important context, doesn't it? Because we don't have predictably easy lives. You mentioned earlier that you have worked very hard to create a context in which you celebrate the goals and achievements of your marriage, but also we face storms, we face challenges. Knowing that there's that foundation of love is so important. But then how else have you navigated those storms together as a couple that you might sometimes face?
I think we're very blessed in that we have really strong family support structures. Not everybody does, and we acknowledge that we're very blessed that we do. So we have a strong family, extended family that support us and that care for us and actually give us inspiration in our marriage as well. We both our parents have been married for a very long time, and we look to them, as a source of inspiration, and actually knowing that they can get through challenges and trials and helps us. So I think, we have an extended network. We have some very good friends and, like-minded friends as well. A good number of Christian friends who we can turn to and talk to about things related to our faith, or when we're having challenges that can pray with us, etc. So I think that's one area, sort of an extended network.
And were you intentional about the kind of support network in terms of friends that you were able to go to and for prayer or for encouragement? Or was that something that just kind of happened?
I think we're fortunate to be in a church where actually we're around a lot of those people a lot of the time, and we have regular contact with our families, so we can do that as we need to. But I think one of the most important decisions we took when we were preparing for marriage, particularly given that we're bringing two different cultures together, is we're forming a new unit, and we were very mindful to control outside influences coming into that marriage, so into that new unit. So we didn't kind of open the doors on that universally, but actually we've been really open with each other when we feel we want to, either as a couple or individually, go and seek some counsel from someone else, because we're not pros at this. We're doing this for the first time and for the only time, so there will be times we want someone else to help us out, and that's okay. And so we've been really careful not to disrupt our unit, but recognizing that our healthy unit is going to need input from people who've done this before, who know how to do this, and being judicious about when we go and engage with those people.
Great. So you have two young girls, beautiful girls. How would you say you've grown together as a couple by having children?
Oh, it's just been the most amazing adventure and the most amazing journey that we could ever wish for. And, our prayers have been answered in terms of having two beautiful, healthy, vibrant, joyful girls bouncing around, landing on our bed, first thing in the morning, jumping around. And they're both actually very joyful children. We're very blessed. It's the wonderful thing about parenting, as you guys, know, is that you see strengths in your partner, and you see attributes in your partner that actually can just melt your heart. So to see the love that the girls have for their daddy, and to see how much he just adores them every day, it melts my heart. And when you get that feeling, it can only reinforce the feeling that you have towards one another. So I think actually parenting is the hardest job in the world. It's the most demanding. It can be the most challenging, but it is the most rewarding. And we set out some goals and some kind of, red lines. So we always said, that we don't want to fundamentally change who we are because of having children. Like, having children kind of have to fit in with us. So we've traveled a lot. We've taken the girls to Nigeria, we've taken them to Hong Kong and Australia and Singapore. And people actually tried to almost put us off doing that, saying, it's too much. But we said, no. This is part of who we are. Traveling is important to us. We want them to have these experiences. So we're going to make it work. And if it's a hard flight, so be it. But it's only one flight. We'll get there and we'll have a great time. So we've always been quite strict in that sense, in that, we knew that there were some things that we weren't prepared to just give up and to sacrifice. So I think that's probably part of what's made it, making it work.
I think that that's such a key reflection, because often what happens with couples is that they drift when they have kids because they start to focus on the children, the sleep schedule goes out the window, your energy resources, any kind of strength to love your husband or wife after you've given to your kids just seems to be evaporating. But the decision to say, you know what, our marriage is first, and our kids will do good out of us focusing on our marriage is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you also give us some insight into, as you've been developing that, what do you do? You mentioned earlier the issue of bringing two cultures together. How do you bring two cultures together in your marriage, and then particularly with your children? Are you keeping elements of your Nigerian culture alive, or your British culture alive? Or are you seeking to create a third way? What's going on with that?
Kind of all three, really.
That's right. So I think the reality is we're forming something very new.
Yeah.
And for our children, they are not either of our traditions, they're both. And it would be really easy. We live in England, right? So it's really easy for them to adopt one culture, and we have to work really hard to remind them of their other heritages. So we often, we've taken them to Nigeria, and we wanted to do that at a really early age. That wasn't something I was able to do when I was younger. So giving them that exposure was amazing for them. They went last year, and there was such an identification, and they were in a different context where there were more people who looked like Daddy than didn't. And just their inquisitive minds took them on a journey. And they were actually starting to identify with different parts of themselves that perhaps they had questions about, even at this really young age. And we do really small things, but actually they really reinforce their identity. So we play Yoruba music.
I have the river dance CD, so when we go to ballet on a Saturday mornings, we play the river dance like in the car quite loud, and they really get into it. They've got Irish, clothing, Scottish clothing, because I have an Irish and a Scottish and English background. They've got native Nigerian clothing. They've got a mix of the names, so they've both got Yoruba middle names,
They speak with their grandparents a lot, regularly, and so they have very contrasting experiences with their grandparents, and actually even as their parents sometimes they learn that we can't just rescue them all the time, and so they get really authentic experiences that help them understand the different aspects of who they are, and it's not about one trumping another, but actually, I think probably I would describe the best example I would give is they describe themselves as caramel. That's uniquely who they are, and they know why they're caramel and how they came to being that way. And that's it's a really childish way of referencing it, but actually they recognise their difference and they're totally all right with that.
And they chose that. That wasn't something that we talked about. That was something that our eldest daughter just turned to us one day and said, "Mummy, you're pink, Daddy's brown, and I'm caramel." So, yeah.
I think it's so important to. I'm a child of mixed race parents. Sure. I'm half Chinese, half English, and there's some elements of my Chineseness that I feel like I've missed out on. And so, just having that intentionality, and now with our kids, I mean, they love me hanging out with my dad because he gives them dim sum, and Rebecca's converting them. They love watching the All Blacks, and I'm hoping that Luke or Isaiah will wear a white top one day, but she wants it to be the black jersey. So there's all of these kind of different tensions that you have within family, but it's so important to really champion your cultures and invest in each other's cultures as well. And we just spent some time over in New Zealand for Rebecca's sister's wedding and seeing family, and that was just lovely to keep them connected. So where you are today, 10 years of marriage, looking forward into the future, could I ask you to focus in on one revelation of God that's really gripped your heart as you've grown your family, you find yourself here today, as you look forward to what God is going to do in the future? What revelation do you think you've got?
For me, it's about trusting in God's time, and God's timing is always right, and there's always a reason for everything. And I think that this really became a revelation to me probably around the time that we got married. From the point that we got married until now, we've gone through some huge and significant life changes and circumstances, from moving house, having children, actually getting married and getting through the honeymoon period, and we're experiencing challenges as well, sort of wider challenges that we're supporting one another through, and jobs and situations. And for me, it's to always trust in God that everything is happening for a reason and that his timing is perfect, because it has always proven to be.
Sure.
Even when you're in the midst of a storm, you can look back and say, I now understand why that had to happen then. And I can see the influence, and I can see why, and those building blocks all just piece together.
And you, Doyin?
I think the biggest step for me has come actually with having children, and how in relating to each other and to our children, I'm understanding only a little bit about how compassionate God is towards us. I guess when you see how much a child can test you, and then actually at the end of all that, it's all forgotten, and the love is absolute and unconditional and unlimited. It speaks to how much more God must love us, because then I think about some of my own chaos and mess that I have created, and that's what God describes. That's what he describes in his love letter to us, about how he wants to relate to us. And even as we discipline and shape the people we want our children to become, that doesn't lessen our affection towards them, or the support or goodwill that we have towards them. And it's been a massive revelation. I've understood something about how God loves us as his children that I would have struggled to understand in any other context. And as God being such a central theme to our marriage, that actually we cannot give up on each other. There will be days where we have just annoyed each other enough to walk the other way and never return. And I won't lie, it's probably happened a couple of times, but actually we've always come back, because that's the covenant. We have absolutely committed to that, and now we have to make it work. Someone has to get over themselves, probably me.
I think that's a great place for us to end on. It's such a good point that through the covenant of love, we can really know the Father for who he is and catch that deeper revelation. And in a very real way, marriage and family give glory back to God. Thank you so much for inspiring us once again that love at first sight can happen, but showing and sharing how you've invested in your love over the years. And thank you for joining us today. You can go to our website for more resources on how to invest in your marriage and on some of the different topics that we've discussed today. We look forward to seeing you next time here on Embracing the Challenge.